Hello, my dear friends, and welcome to another episode of Europa Rediviva. For the past months, I've been regularly reading in Western media the fact that the war between Russia and NATO is closing in. Various dates were given as to when it will start, and the mechanism of action was always given to be a Russian provocation. So the Western media continuously wrote and is still writing the fact that at some point Russia will attack NATO in order to test its resolve, to test its strength, to test its solidarity, to test Article 5 and so on. Of course, the same Western media does not report on all the strikes that are carried out on the territory of Russia continuously by NATO. Of course, it is done under the guise of Ukraine. Most of those drones start on the territory of Ukraine, but they use NATO capabilities. They use NATO satellites. The operational planning and the targeting is done by NATO in various bases in Germany, by NATO officers. There are also NATO officers on the ground in Ukraine. All of these things are admitted by Western media sources, by the New York Times. I mean, there's nothing about this conflict that is not referenceable from Western sources. The fact that 2014 was a coup d'etat, the so-called Revolution of Dignity, was a CIA-orchestrated coup. This is also referenceable in the New York Times if you dig deep enough. The fact that the CIA established bases everywhere, that Ukraine was essentially turned into a de facto NATO state, so it started operating under NATO command, even though nominally it was not part of NATO, and so on. And the fact that all of these deep strikes into Russia and the terrorist attacks against Russian civilians and so on are planned and executed, planned by Western intelligence services, particularly the MI6, so the British Foreign Intelligence Service, and executed to a large extent by the Ukrainians, but not only, also using NATO assets, NATO capabilities, and so on. And all of these things are provocations to ensure a Russian response. Russia has so far declined to respond to provocations. Russia has so far refrained from doing what any country would do in its place, including Iran, which is to attack the bases of the United States or of other NATO countries outside of Ukraine. So to attack them in other NATO countries. It hasn't done so until now. Somehow the strategy of the West, the strategy of NATO, seems to be, or at least this is in the official discourse, that we will enable Ukraine to strike deeper and more into Russia, which is a way of saying that we will strike deeper into Russia and we will strike more, so as to force Russia to capitulate. Of course, Russia, being a great power, being a nuclear-armed country and so on, will not capitulate. It will just respond. So at a certain threshold, Russia will consider that it has nothing else to lose because it is already under constant attack, and it will respond. Probably Russia has already decided to do that, and it's just planning it strategically, operationally, when to respond where, because Russia does not act on impulse. Of course, because the Western public doesn't devote much time to informing themselves on this topic. And when it does, it just reads the headlines and maybe some opinion pieces from the Western propaganda machine. They have no idea about all of these provocations and all of these attacks on the territory of Russia, including atrocities against Russian civilians, which are rhetorically backed up with a Nazi discourse on behalf of Ukraine, with racial discourse that Russians are Mongolians, that it's Asian scum that needs to be eradicated and so on, and this kind of very inflammatory racist discourse that of course puts a lot of public pressure on the state officials of Russia to respond, to escalate. And because the Western public doesn't know of these things, even though they are perfectly referenceable in Western sources, the neo-Nazi nature of the regime in Kiev and so on. All of these things are referenceable from Western media sources, but the majority of the Western public consider themselves informed just by skimming through titles, and the titles are inflammatory and unidirectional, in the sense of we are good, they are bad, we win, they lose, they commit mass atrocities, we only do good things, we are not involved, we are peaceful, we are neutral, we just help Ukraine, and so on. And the majority of the Western public has this opinion, because the majority of the Western public hasn't woken up to the idea that if you want to have an opinion on an issue, you actually need to dig a bit in order to understand the fundamentals of the issue. You cannot just claim to have an opinion by having read thousands of titles from one direction, thousands of headlines from the mainstream Western media. Because if you do that, you'll fall into all sorts of into all sorts of traps laid out by by the United States and by NATO. So, for example, one of these traps, which is very obvious and very easy to point out, the fact that Taiwan is not a country. So, if you build your impression of the world just through reading Western headlines, you will never find out. Nobody's ever going to tell you that Taiwan is not a country. That no country recognizes, not even Taiwan itself, recognizes Taiwan to be anything else but China. Nobody will tell you. Everybody will tell you. So all the headlines of the Western media machine will give you the impression that Taiwan is an independent country. It's a neighbor of China. And China is aggressive towards it. It is expansionist and it tries to conquer it. Because this is the nature of dictatorships. This is the nature of Russia. This is the nature of China. This is the nature of Iran. They're all genocidal dictatorships, totalitarian states which persecute their own citizens and which want to invade their neighbors and genocide them. It's false. It's rather the other way around. This is the nature of many Western countries. And of course the nature of the United States and of its most beloved proxy. But you will never understand this if you only read Western press and if you only stick to the headlines, if you don't do your own investigation. And since the majority of the Western public does not do their own investigation, at some point this Russian attack will come. And the Western media will say that it was unprovoked. The Western media will say, we always told you that Russia is expansionist and Russia wants to attack the West. As if the West never did anything to Russia, and Russia is just, because Putin is crazy, just went on an attacking spree. What is more, not only did the West engineer this discourse to say that whatever it does is legitimate and that it mostly does nothing, so it conceals what it actually does, whereas what Russia does is illegitimate and illegal and unprovoked, and it is not a response to something. It's just because Russia is crazy and this is what Russia does. This is what crazies do. Not only did the West engineer the public discourse in this way, the West also engineered the public to believe that whoever says otherwise, even though they might be experts or something, is a Russian agent, is paid by the enemy to confuse them, to sow discontent and to sow division in Western societies. This is how the discourse was engineered. So the Western public, the one that goes to the polls and stamps ballot boxes and the result is called democracy, cannot extract itself democratically from this war path, because it believes that, first of all, it does nothing, Even if it does something, it's like something humanitarian to help the poor Ukrainians, blah, blah. And it will never believe that they are the ones instigating the Third World War. And when Russia's retaliation will come, they will believe the media that will say that it was unprovoked. And that Russia, just out of the madness of this dictator, decided to start bombing NATO. And if you've been following me for some time, you will know that I've been saying this for quite some time now. I've been warning that we are on a war path against Russia. Of course, I was doing this from the Romanian context, which I no longer do because Romania is a basket case. It has ceased to be a country, and it is just it's basically gone on the path of Ukraine. It no longer belongs to itself, and its population will soon be sent to the meat grinder. It is a completely co-opted state that functions invertedly, functions inside out, persecuting any kind of agents of the domestic interest and promoting the agents of foreign interest. So I was saying this with respect to Romania, and I always got the objection, well, Russia would never attack a NATO country, so it would never attack Romania. Yeah, sure, it would never attack a NATO country, maybe, unless we provoke it to such an extent that it will consider that it is already at war with NATO, so it has nothing to lose from not responding. It has nothing to lose from responding. But in the case of Romania, I was thinking of something else. I was thinking that NATO would engineer a false flag attack in order to strengthen Ukraine, so to feed Romania into Ukraine essentially, and to have Romania is already functioning to a large extent economically at the behest of Ukraine and in the interest of Ukraine, but to just feed it, to also feed the human base into the Ukrainian front lines through conscription and so on. And I think Constanța was such an attempt. It failed because of because of an accident. It did not go through. Similar false flag attacks might be possible in the future, but because Romania is just an accident waiting to happen. Now there is no more there's no more thread in Romanian society, inside Romanian security services, inside the Romanian military apparatus. There is no more patriotic thread, so there is no chain of command to oppose it. And when you have this opportunity next to you, why not use it? But this larger war between Russia and NATO is also being slowly instigated. So the more of these deep strikes that NATO does against Russia, using, as I said, NATO capabilities. Ukraine doesn't have satellites. Ukraine cannot do targeting on the territory of Russia because it doesn't know the coordinates and so on. It doesn't have the satellites to guide the drones. But anyway, so the more of these deep strikes NATO does, and NATO congratulates itself for them, the closer we inch towards the threshold where Russia deems it necessary to respond. So we are basically eating away at this Russian patience and Russian restraint, and we are flooding them with attacks so that we ensure that Russia will respond. And once Russia responds, we will enter on the war path. It's kind of an automated mechanism that we will consider ourselves attacked, right? NATO will consider themselves attacked, and from that point onwards, these military measures will be enacted, will be put in place that the civilian population cannot do anything against. So it will no longer be possible for democracy to function. Once you are in a state of war, then you are led by the military command, and even if civilians want to go and vote, nothing can change. South Korea is, for example, in this scenario. It has a treaty with the United States, a treaty that was forced upon it by the United States, that in case of war, the South Korean army is not operated by the South Korean state. The South Korean army is operated by the U.S. state. So South Korean army automatically goes under the U.S. command, and it cannot refuse to invade the north, for example, in case such a state is reached. And this was the case last year or 2 years ago. I don't remember. There was this president that the U.S. helped gain power in South Korea, and then he made a coup against the parliament and tried to pretend that there was a North Korean attack so as to respond and to put South Korea into war with the North, and to have, of course, the U.S. essentially use the South Korean army to invade the North with, so as to weaken Russia, of course, because Russia was using North Korean troops in Kursk to liberate its province of Kursk from these well, it wasn't the regular Ukrainian army that invaded the Kursk region. The regular Ukrainian army wanted to have plausible deniability, so it sent in some mercenary brigades made up of internationals. And the Ukraine said it was not involved. It just it was just watching as patriotic Russians from neo-Nazi brigades that had gone into exile were conquering their motherland. This was the narrative. And because Russia was using North Korean troops to repel this attack, then the US tried to instigate this war against North Korea, using South Korea, its proxy, the one that it has military occupied ever since the 1950s. So this is how things are orchestrated. We have these Western European countries like Germany and Italy, which are massively occupied by the U.S. Army. They're occupied to such an extent, and of course their deep state is co-opted to such an extent that they are not even aware of it anymore. So all of Italy's post-war history has been a constant operation by the United States and by NATO to subvert Italian democracy and to prevent the communists from democratically reaching power, even though they were the most popular political force. And the Americans used the mafia for this. It used these brigades, these far-right terrorist groups, to commit all sorts of assassinations, like the one of Aldo Moro, who wanted to co-opt the communists into the government, to stage all sorts of false flag attacks and to pin them on the communists so as to reduce their popular support, and so on. This is how the democratic and free West is run, and this is what being a member of NATO entails. So, yeah, we are inching closer and closer to this NATO-Russia conflict, which will be illegal and unprovoked. It will come from an illegal and unprovoked attack by Russia on NATO, and whoever will say otherwise is a Russian stooge, of course, is a Russian paid propagandist, a Russian instigator, and must be dealt with accordingly, right, under military under a military state of exception. Looking forward to seeing these conditions being orchestrated in the West. This is why it was important for me to leave Romania so as to escape this madness that is unfolding there. But to a smaller degree, it will unfold in any NATO country, in every Western country, in order to garner up support for the countries that will be on the front line, right? On the eastern flank, we will have the remake of Operation Barbarossa. There will be all of these free and democratic societies trying to defend their freedom by invading the Russian Federation. And the countries in the back will have to provide support. They will also have to be war economies because they will need to reinforce the front lines, at least with military equipment, if not also with troops. So this is what I wanted to talk to you about. If you like what I do, like, share, subscribe. And if you want to support me financially, you'll find the link in the description how to do so. And until next time, take care.